All right, thanks everybody. I know I'm last, so I try not to take the whole thing and give everyone a break to get coffee. So let me sort of talk about what my goal here today is, to leave everyone with a few things to think about. Been involved, I think, with O3DE from the early beginnings when we were still talking about it with Lumberyard. And I'll tell sort of our story and what I think some of the lessons learned are and where we can take it in the future. And I can say some things that not everyone can say, so I look forward to the feedback. But let me talk about Apocalypse first, just so you understand who we are and what I am. Apocalypse Studios is a game company that I created and founded in 2018. Apocalypse is ancient Greek to reveal the unknown, and our goal is to actually create experiences that people have never seen before. So we started thinking about the cloud, I guess before it was really cool. Blockchain came along and then people started calling it the metaverse. So we've been thinking about these ideas for quite a while. And a lot of our philosophies, believe it or not, are based off of quantum mechanics and theoretical physics. And if you want to talk about the block universe, or how our ideas of moving things in 3D space is actually outdated since Einstein started talking about the theory of relativity, I would love to talk about that. But I'm not here to talk about that today. We are working on a game called Dead House Sonata. It's a narrative-driven action RPG where you play the undead fighting the living. So if you're interested in being a vampire, a revenant, a banshee, in a beautifully horrific world, come talk to me about that. We are trying to create the holy grail of narrative. It is a free-to-play action RPG, ethical, and we are trying to create immersive narratives where everyone can contribute. And there's a whole story there. But I think the whole merger of ethical free-to-play with the blockchain, which seems like an oxymoron, is something that we really have to do for the games industry. And these kind of things, by having these discussions and discussing it with people here has been fantastic in some of the theories. And talking about how NFTs are broken, these are the things that we're trying to tackle, and I actually think we have some solutions, but time will tell, so you can maybe laugh at me in a few years. But let's talk about sort of our journey in O3DE when we first started. So just a bit of background, I talked about the start of the company. We were a typical company that was working in a small office, and the pandemic hit. We immediately moved everything up into the cloud. We had a lot of help from Amazon in doing that. Within 2 weeks, we had to either look at, are we going to die as a company because everything's being shut down, or can we move to the cloud? We moved to the cloud in 2 weeks. We started talking to everyone on how we could be a remote company, and it turned out really well. Wrote a blog, became an AWS hero. All those kind of things came into place, but we had the ability to talk to people at Amazon who not only helped us, but then we started thinking about these things. And when the engine launched last year, it was such a huge success. There is now a stake in the sand. The foundation itself, run by Royal, who is killing it right now, bringing conferences together like this, I think is a success immediately. And the whole idea of the foundation taking this on is really fantastic, and I've been able to talk to a lot of people where the open source itself is going to become dominant, especially with blockchain coming in. Blockchain is coming. It's not going to be stopped. The amount of momentum there is something that really is going to be overwhelming from a sort of a macro perspective. And the amount of stuff in the engine on launch already was incredible. It's I think in some ways, thinking about it as, it went from Lumberyard to the O3DE engine is a bit of a disservice because everything is so new and it's so awesome. So the renderer, all the things that are going in now with the new tools back a year ago were fantastic. And I remember seeing this delta and thinking, this is so incredible, and the amount of change was so overwhelming that I don't think people truly understood who were coming in at the time and seeing the launch. It was just so incredible. So, and open source is the future. I'm going to talk a little about that later, but I am convinced of that. And I think when I saw, Royal in Brighton this year, and we were talking about that, I think that's, why I'm here now, because I do think that's the case. And, sometimes I say things, I want to apologize now for any broad sweeping generalizations. And that I do feel and have some opinions that, that I hope will hit home, and I can give a little bit of a tough talk now because I think it's needed. So the O3DE engine is very early. It's very expensive to develop on it, and why is that? Because it's still not finished, and that should be obvious to people. When we were working on it, we had to write a lot of code. It took us a long time. There's not a lot of documentation, so you have to figure these things out. These are things that'll get fixed over time. However, as an independent developer trying to raise funds, there's a lot of headwinds, and one of the first things you're going to get from anyone, whether it's an investor or a publisher, is going to be, no games have shipped on this engine. Why are you using it? We heard that hundreds of times. And in the video game industry, you get used to hearing that, but it's an uphill battle that must be overcome. And there are also open source challenges. And I'm going to get into these very shortly, but suffice to say, the video game industry is not compatible culturally with open source. As a matter of fact, it's the opposite. It's almost never sharing, and the game culture itself, when it comes to NDAs, I sign NDAs like water every day in this industry. And the whole idea of open source, that culture needs to be really overcome, and that's a challenge. So, how do we fix these challenges? Well, I have some recommendations. For the smaller groups like ourselves, just keep making things. It's awesome. Contribute to the source code. You're doing great. And this is where I get to say some things that not everyone else can say, but I say it with love. Some of the bigger partners, you're not doing enough. It's not okay to just be a partner, contribute to the society. Because what I think needs to happen is money needs to be put in to publish a game. There needs to be funding, and I know I'm a bit biased, but video games generally lead the way. Even if the game is not successful, by putting stakes in the sand saying, I need this, I need these terrain environments, or these terrain tools, I need this type of multi-threading, I need this AI, and I need it by this date, will drive the engine forward faster than anything else. So what I think the larger companies should do, and I mean the really big ones, and I know you have the money, you can't fool me, people need to get together and fund a game on the engine. And when we were working on it, we faced incredible headwinds. And not only that, so if you're not into that, if you're not into funding games, it's still you can do more. So as an example, when we were using tools to create this model, I wanted to make it open source. I wanted to use the licenses of Creative Commons, but we couldn't. Because the tools themselves, the licenses for these tools that we use, for some of the partners here, are not compatible with Creative Commons. And when we started talking to people and saying, how do we do this? We want to do this. They were like, tell your lawyers to call them up to talk to their lawyers to see what you can do. And as a small company, the answer was, they probably won't even take our call. So if you're contributing to the O3DE engine and you're a partner that makes a tool, look at your licenses and make them compatible with Creative Commons or Apache. And allow people to start creating open source, because right now it is very hard and it's incompatible as far as we can see. And having done this for a long time, it's not like you can just do the traditional things in gaming industries like buy libraries. You literally have to create things from scratch to do true open source. But if you're doing that, even some of the tools when you're using their libraries, it's definitely not clear or definitely incompatible when you create something with these tools that you can't make it open source. So look at your licenses, get your lawyers together, change these things. And if that's not what you do, help fund a title. Put some money on the table. There's some good developers here. I've already met them. They need funding. Give them some money to make some games on the O3DE engine. That's, I think, how we overcome these challenges. So the future is super bright. And when I look at this, we're currently with O3DE in the toughest cycle right now. And what I mean by that, launched last year, the honeymoon's over now. So now we're in the mid-section where more's coming, but it's not a success yet. But what's happening, I use this conference as a perfect example. I have never had more fun, ever, in a conference than some of these metaverse birds of a feather. And it's funny watching the kind of identity security posse running around talking about you got to be careful here, and I see all these dark forest analogies of you better watch it, better not give too much information away. And you have know-it-all developers like myself being able to spout off about engagement theory and this is what we should do. And then you have other people saying we don't want to define the metaverse. And I'm sitting there going, how can you work on something if it's not defined? I want to have more of those conversations, but these are excellent. The diversity of opinion and knowledge here is fantastic. And if that continues, this will be unstoppable. And I think that when it comes to open source, and when you're looking at the future of blockchain and the metaverse, that open source will guarantee its success. And when you look at all these factors together, I think the one thing and the one message I can leave everyone with, and I truly believe this, the best way to predict the future is to create it yourself. So get out there, make a difference, contribute, and change the world. Thank you.